Admittedly, 2020, it's been a hell of a year, and I do not mean in a good way, which is why Kumo and I, we like to focus on the positivity in life. Things like pre-production vehicles being flown over von Zuffenhausen for us to drive here in Los Angeles. And you got to admit, in 2020, we've been very fortunate because we've had a number of those opportunities, and yet here's another one that has just rolled into the hangar. This one, however, presents a completely different question, one we have not had to answer all year, or for that matter, any year. Does one really need a station wagon with almost 700 horsepower? I can't say I know the answer, but we should certainly find out. Remember the 2021 Porsche Panamera Turbo S recently drove? Well, this is not that car. What you are looking at is a plug-in hybrid. Let's start with the fossil fuel side of the house. 4-liter twin turbocharged V8, good for 563 horsepower, comes in at 5,750 RPM, stays flat all up to 6,000 RPM. Then the torque, 567 pound-feet, that comes in at 2,100 RPM, stays flat all up to 4,500 RPM. Then there's the EV side of the house. Yes, there is an electric motor, and the car can run completely on electric only. That's 134 horsepower. Now, as we've learned over many years, you can't just add those two numbers and you get the total system horsepower. However, here the numbers are incredibly close. I'm not making any of this up. 690 total system horsepower that comes in at 6,000 RPM and 642 pound-feet of torque that comes in at 1,500 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 5,500 RPM. Now, while you digest that, I will press on. That drives all four wheels through anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed PDK, meaning no torque converter. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, there's going to be some sort of fuel economy here, but this car is so early. It was flown over from Germany. This is a German market car. So I do not have any EPA MPG estimates, but suffice to say, this is not going to hit like the 50 MPG numbers. Now that we have the pedantic details out of the way, let's press on to the business of what this car is really about, which are the performance figures. 0 to 60, 3 seconds. VMAX, 196 miles an hour. And just in case you really had a burning desire to know, VMAX in EV mode only, 87 miles an hour. Those performance figures, incredible, right? That's what I thought, until I found one tiny chink in the armor. 5,311 pounds, depending on how you express your weights and measures, 2,409 kilograms in Sport Plus hybrid mode. Holy sh! This thing is crazy fast! God, this is good. It melts your face. Like, you feel the acceleration in your face. That is what is going on here. That said, the car you are looking at, a German market car, is fitted with the carbon ceramic rotors, and these are almost comical in size. 420 mils in the front, 410 in the back. Translated, that's 16.5 inches in the front and 16 in the rear. Notice the caliper here, that's a monoblock caliper. 10 pistons up front and 4 pistons in the rear. Now that we have the details of the braking system out of the way, let's focus on that second propulsion system, backbone of which would be the 17.9 kilowatt hour battery. In our recent 4SE hybrid episode, we covered how that battery is now different for the 21 model year, and for the avoidance of doubt, the battery in this, as well as the 4SE hybrid, will be the same. And the big change was more cells in the same battery footprint. Porsche is talking something like almost 30% more density in this battery pack. And then there is the charging system. Here we have to get something out of the way right at the top. No, it's not the same super fast charging architecture that the Taycan has. The Taycan is fitted with completely different wiring and 2 different chargers that enables it to charge really fast. This one is fitted with one 7.2 kilowatt charger, which brings up an incredibly good point. Again, this car, it's a German market car. It hasn't been handed over to the US government for EPA testing. So not only do we not have fuel economy estimates, we don't have range estimates. If I were to kind of read the tea leaves here, The car, I was able to get about 20 miles out of it, but if I were to give it a full charge, my guess is the target would be somewhere between 30 and 40 miles of range. That we'll have to revisit when we drive a US market car. That weight. It is more noticeable here than in the Turbo S, the ICE only version. Remember that 620 horsepower car? That one felt lighter on its feet. It's not that this thing is a pig, but you do feel the extra propulsion system here. But that only rears its ugly head way up here at super high levels of adhesion. Think moderate to moderately aggressive, and this thing, it feels, can't believe I'm saying this, it feels like a 4,000-pound car. Remember, this thing has the 3-chamber air ride and 4-wheel steering in the back, which transforms the car, but I would say it goes even farther with the tuning in this derivation, that it has to counteract that extra weight, and there is really good control over all planes of motion. I would say the hardest in a really long vehicle like this is pitch, and that's where it has the most control. Yes, I know what you're expecting, but no, we cannot play a round of our favorite game, the options game, because there are no prices yet, at least in the US. Once again, this is a German market car. It will not be on offer in the US until middle of next year, something like that. But I was able to get a build sheet out of the folks in Germany, and that does point out a couple of things. Number one, the stuff that is on the European cars that won't be on the US cars. And then number two, the stuff that's on the US cars that won't be on the European cars. Follow me? Anyway, let's start with the color. That's the most important. This color you need to see in person. I know in camera it probably looks like pumpkin soup, something like that, but it is called papaya metallic. It looks wunderbar, and my guess it's probably extra cost. That is then paired with agate gray interior. We've seen that color interior before on many other Porsches, but this is the first time I've actually seen a gray interior in a Porsche absolutely pop. And this one has the full leather interior. Everything is leather, including the suede or faux suede headliner, which I believe that is fitted as standard to the Turbo S and Turbo SE hybrid. And then we add to that the Burmester stereo system. That I believe is optional. If my memory serves me correctly, you're talking like a $5,000 option. And then this car is fitted with something that you cannot get in the US, at least currently, and that is the always-on high beam system. They call it the Porsche dynamic lighting system. It's a $4,000 option. You know what? I'm not even mad at that part. What I am mad at, we can't have that here in the US because the US government hasn't tested it or at least blessed it yet. Please get off your ass and bless it. It is so much safer. I've driven now a couple of cars here in the US with this system, and excuse the pun, but it is a night and day difference to have an always-on high beam system. I'm going to get off my soapbox and get onto something else. The trim on this car is finished in black. That is an option. We've seen it in other Porsches. There is a storage package in this car. A couple of things you can see behind me here. But most importantly, there is an option fitted to this car I have never seen on any other Porsche in my life. And that probably is my second favorite option after the Burmester stereo. And that would be a ski bag. Can I say vielen Dank? Then this one has the brushed aluminum trim on the dash, and I find that incredibly strange because Kumo did a bit of digging between the build sheet as well as the press release from both the US as well as Germany, and if we're reading the tea leaves correctly, it looks as if burled walnut, real wood, is fitted as standard to the Turbo SE hybrid, which would look so much better in this very car, especially in the papaya metallic. Then this car is also fitted with a number of Porsche exclusive manufacture options. Number one, the smoked out taillights. Number two, the stunning illuminated door sill guards. Those are an absolute weakness of mine. Let's call it my number 3 favorite option for Porsches. And then the most noticeable of these Porsche exclusive manufacture options, the 21-inch exclusive wheels that are finished in aluminum and jet black metallic. They look incredible, and they better, because they probably cost somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 additional. And then there are some standard items on the Turbo SE Hybrid. Again, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the 18-way sport seats, those are fitted as standard, as well as a panoramic sunroof. Now notice, this car doesn't have the panoramic sunroof. That's one of the differences between the US and Europe. In Europe, the panoramic roof, that's optional. In the US, all the cars will be fitted with the sunroof. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank, very excited about that. And that brings us to the Captain Obvious question. How much is the car I'm sitting on right now? Well, if I were to take a stab in the dark at the base price, somewhere between 170, maybe 190 grand. But the car you are looking at, definitely well north of 200 grand, probably by a whole Toyota price. You may have noticed throughout this episode that has been on e-charge, and I've done that for a very specific reason. You see, we have recuperated 32 miles of range, and I would like to spend all of that driving this 5,311 pound car very aggressively on canyon roads in electric mode. So with that, let's go to e-power. And now we're driving on sunshine. Now, here's the catch. I can't push it as aggressively, meaning we cannot get over 87 miles an hour. Don't really think that's going to be a problem on these roads. My guess is you and I will burn through that range rather quickly, but a couple of notes of observation. Number one, the personality driving it aggressively in this mode is completely different, and I would argue it's not because I'm pushing it as aggressively, it's because of the oral sensation. There is no engine sound whatsoever. Aside from that observation, the biggest thing you notice when you try to get really aggressive, the gas engine is going to kick in, whether you're in e-power mode or not. Now, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that's probably where the Taycan comes in. That said, I'm just happy it has this mode. I think the biggest learning we've taken from this is the suspension is separated from the propulsion system, meaning we can set up the stiffer of the sport setting and still drive it in the EV propulsion mode. After today's experience, I can't help but feeling you and I, we live in some very strange times. And no, I don't mean because of the obvious, rather because the desires of broken car guys and gals like you and I have changed drastically in a very short period of time, and I will prove it to you. There is a car at the back of this hangar. It is a 2007 Ferrari F430, and yes, it does have 3 pedals. I think we would all agree that was a desirable vehicle back then. However, it was also the last of its breed, meaning they stopped making the manual. Yeah, they make cars like it now, but one would argue, oh, the F1 box is so much better, or people won't buy a manual and that expensive of a car anymore. I would argue the reason is something entirely different. The desirability of cars has changed. It's not only something that is small, impractical, and red from Italy. It could be something that is very large, that is from Germany, that is insanely fast, has 2 propulsion systems, and believe it or not, can also be practical, but that's not what the car is about. Instead, I would argue for all the reasons we just covered and then some, this car right here, which is painted in a shade that is oddly similar to a pumpkin, is equally as desirable to car guys and gals of 2020 as that F430 was desirable back in 2007. Which brings us to the question we posed at the top of the episode. Why, yes, as a matter of fact, you do need a 700 horsepower station wagon. Hopefully, I have not been unclear. Until I see you next time, bis später.